That was a roller coaster. Washington beats Colorado State 38-21.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. Click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the channel out a lot. Now, as I'm hopped up on pre-workout adrenaline, coming off a late-night Washington victory over Colorado State 38-21, I want to make sure we dive into everything in this game. Left some time at the end just to dive into some things like that really weird fourth down call that got Rahshawn Clark a sack. We'll dive into that later. I want to talk about the ups and downs of the defense because that really was a roller coaster, especially on that side of the ball. But as always, I love to start on the offensive side of the ball here, and there is no better place to start than let's call it what it is. Jonah Coleman is a freaking superstar, man. 24 carries, 177 yards, plus a 22-yard reception. So he finishes the day with 199 yards from scrimmage and a pair of touchdowns. And just, he's everything you expect him to be. Really, there's no other way to put it. And it's so exciting because there are some moments with Demond Williams where we saw what he's going to be. Some of the plays he was able to make with both his arms and his legs shows, yeah, okay, this guy can absolutely be a top 3, top 5 quarterback in this conference, whatever you want to say. But when you have a guy like Jonah Coleman next to him, it's going to make things so much easier. Obviously, Colorado State, being a G5 opponent, they're not going to have the same level of talent that you might see at the end of the month when Ohio State comes to town against some of these other top tier Big Ten teams. But for the most part, when you look at what Jonah Coleman did today, it was everything that you would expect from him and more. The wiggle that he showed in tight areas, the burst that he's shown now that he's changed his body, that speed was electric. That play he had in the fourth quarter that looked like it might have been a touchdown. He said allegedly he was down. It was great to talk to him about that after the game. I could not be more impressed with him. And I think even at this point, calling him a top 3 running back in the nation might be underselling him. Jeremiah Love, Nicholas Singleton seem to be the only guys that can hold a candle to him. And with the way he's changed his body and how athletic he looked in some of those tight areas, the way he was just able to wiggle through the offensive line, which, by the way, the offensive line had a really good day. I'll get to that in a minute. But I look at what Jonah did, and as we continue to watch Demond Williams develop, now that he's in his first full season as a starter, having a guy like that next to you is going to make things just so much easier for him. So with that being said, I want to kind of jump over to the offensive line here because it allowed a couple of sacks, but when I look at the offensive line, I think there are certainly things to clean up, obviously starting with the miscommunication between Landon Hatchett and Demond Williams, which coming off a timeout is absolutely inexcusable. Just to have that miscommunication come at that point in time, obviously it leads to a Colorado State touchdown. But I look at the offensive line overall, especially in the run blocking, the way they were able to pave the way for Jonah Coleman, looking at it from up in the press box, there were so many open lanes for him to run through, and it just looked so much different than it did last year. And I look at, obviously it's a non-conference team, so, say what you will about the quality of opponent. But when I go back and I look at some of the plays that Jonah made against Weber State last year, or Eastern Michigan, or even Washington State, I think Colorado State's a better team than especially both of the first 2 opponents, Weber State and Eastern Mich. And I was really happy with what the offensive line was able to do in that area of the game. Drew Party was really solid as a run blocker. I think John Mills looked, exactly what you'd kind of expect a true freshman making his first start to look like. As a run blocker, I believe PFF had him with an 80-something grade. The pass blocking, there's certainly some work to do there, but he was a true freshman making his first career start. Now he's got his legs under him, and you know where to improve. I really am encouraged by where this offensive line was going. So, which kind of brings us to the main point here, the always going to be the biggest topic of discussion when it comes to the Huskies. That's Demond Williams Jr. I look at what Demond Williams did, and there's so much more good than bad. Way more. There are a couple of plays where it's, okay, maybe you don't need to take a hit here. Jedd Fisch talked about that after the game, saying there are certain plays where he wants him to slide or get out of bounds instead of trying to run through defenders or, just try to pick up extra yards by getting physical, which certainly makes sense. But there were a couple of plays where it just felt like he held the ball a little bit too long. There were one or two where our good buddy Alex Katz in front of the program just kind of likened it to the Anthony Richardson hit from the preseason, where he knew there was an unblocked rusher coming off the edge and just held on to the ball a little bit too long and took a sack in that department. Obviously, he was able to rebound from that on the next play, which was the long screenplay to Adam Mohammed. But I look at what Demond Williams did on Saturday night, and I just could not have been more encouraged. Just some of the throws he made, the ball placement on that touchdown to Denzel Boston was absolutely perfect. And for a guy who, is a sophomore, making just his third career start, completing 75% of his passes is just so impressive. And even then, he left something on the table where I look at the little wheel route up the sideline of Decker to Graff, where he just barely underthrew him. There were still so much that you can go back to this performance and say, oh yeah, you left a little bit right there, a little bit right there. And that is one of the things where all offseason, Lars and I have been talking on the show about why we're so excited about Demond Williams. And I just kind of look around college football at some of the quarterback performances yesterday. And the more I kind of go back and analyze what, X player did or Y player did, the more I say, yeah, Demond is absolutely in the same category as all these guys, even though he's just making his third career start. And it makes me just so excited about where this offense as a whole is going. Now, we didn't necessarily see the same level of spreading the ball around. I thought Rasheed Williams had a nice day, 4 catches for 30-something yards, and was finding ways to get open. Desmond Roebuck made the first 2 catches of his college career, including the one little in route over the middle of the field, or crossing route, over the middle of the field where he's able to create some separation. And I think that Washington has a ton of weapons, and we kind of, saw that last night. And at the same point, there's still so much just sitting out there to be desired, because when you run for 280 yards, and Demond himself, who ran for, I believe it was 90 before accounting for sacks, there's just so much to be excited about. And when you run for 280 yards, you don't necessarily need to show everything you have in the drop back passing game. And on top of that, again, Demond Williams' pocket awareness is so impressive. As soon as he just gets that clock in his head to speed up just a little bit more and go through his reads just a little bit faster and know when he needs to throw the ball away and not take unnecessary hits and things like that, there's no reason that he can't be a top 5 to 10 quarterback in the country by the end of the season. It really does look like that. And especially when you have somebody on the outside to throw to in Denzel Boston, who 5 catches, 92 yards and a touchdown, he looks spectacular today. And it's something where I know there were some questions about it. I had some questions about this myself, where when Denzel was coming back from the sports hernia surgery that kept him out for the entirety of spring practice and the first couple of weeks of fall camp, I was curious what the timing was going to look like between those two guys. And certainly in the mock game a few weeks ago, it didn't look like it was there. But on the field in that first game, no, it looked like those guys were able to get it right over the final couple of weeks of practice. And I look at this trio of Demond, Jonah Coleman, and Denzel Boston, and I don't think you're going to find a better trio of quarterback, running back, and wide receiver in the Big Ten at the very least, because those guys just combined, they bring so much talent to the field, and they open Jedd Fisch's offense up in so many different ways. Like let's take it back to that touchdown catch where there was a play earlier on where Denzel got hit and maybe should have gotten a pass interference flag. But on that particular play, the body control, the strong hands that you need to be able to pull in a play like that, it's so impressive to watch what he's able to do on a game in, game out basis, especially just picking right up where he left off last season. I'm so excited about what he brings to the table. And it's something that I was talking about a lot leading up to this game. It's what kind of coverages is he going to see, especially after having a game like that moving forward against, I think Washington State is going to be a really interesting example. Obviously, Ohio State the week after that. But I think that Denzel has the ability to be at best, obviously with Jeremiah Smith still being in this conference, the number 2 receiver in this conference in terms of all major stats when you really look at it, because he can be that guy that you can force feed 10, 12, 14 targets to every single game, because he's got the size and the frame to be able to pull all that in. He can be a 1,000-yard receiver easily. He can get to double-digit touchdowns easily. And last night he showed why with his ability to make contested catches, to just find ways to get open with his route running. And I'm so excited to see what that's going to look like as the season goes along, because after gaining over 500 yards of offense in this opening game, that proved that Jedd Fisch's offense is working, and they were able to convert in the red zone time and time again, which is really exciting to see. But if Washington's going to find a way to improve and get to the 9-3 record that I have them pegged at, they're going to need to find a way to improve on defense. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles worn back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. When you use code LOCKEDON, you'll get your vintage hat for $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com to get yours. I'm so excited to get mine. I can't wait because these hats look absolutely fantastic. Let me tell you, go check them out on their website. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about watching tickets for as low as $6 for the upcoming game against UC Davis, and the app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from your seat before you buy. There's also this awesome thing called zone deals. I love zone deals where you can pick the section and Game Time picks the seats and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, let's jump over to the defensive side because Ryan Walters' unit left a lot on the table here. I want to start in the first half because Jalen Dupree had a really solid day. I want to give him some credit because there were several times where he saw what was going on the inside and did a really nice job, getting around the edge, bouncing runs to the outside and breaking outside of the linebacker, the safety, whoever's supposed to be setting the edge, a lot of times it looked like McEllisteen was a little bit late, especially in the first half, just kind of coming down and filling different gaps, which was a little bit disappointing. And you kind of hope that those are just early season things that you want to figure out, even though a lot of those things should have been figured out in fall camp. And I say that because the defensive line, I don't think that Colorado State by any means was able to out physical them, but the pressure was not really where you wanted it to be. There was, a lot of the mix of the 4 down fronts, the 5 down fronts, and Washington did a solid job defending the run in the middle of the field, but a lot of the problems came outside the tackle box. I think that the edge rushers did an okay job setting the run, especially the first half. But again, there were just too many times where whoever the ball carrier was able to get outside the tackles and then just use their speed to get to the outside and pick up 5, 6, 7 yards. I know it doesn't look like it, especially when you go back to the box score and look at how the second half went, which is a nice sign that the Huskies were able to make some adjustments and obviously forcing Colorado State to pass when you were able to go up by a couple of scores helps this as well. So that's something that I want to see how Ryan Walters and his unit might be able to rectify that moving forward as we get a little bit closer to Big Ten play, because there's a lot that really needs to be improved on that front. And I think that a lot of that starts with setting the edge, where there was a bit of a rotation between Zach Durfee and Isaiah Ward on one side of the ball. No surprise when you look at the depth chart where they're listed as or starters. So I'm curious to see what that might look like. I don't know if that was just keeping Zach Durfee fresh in a game like this, and we might see more of that against UC Davis, or what the matter might have been. But that's something I'm willing to be a little patient about, because one guy who I was really impressed with was Jacob Lane. I really liked the way that he was able to set the run. There were a couple of hustle plays that he made where it looked like he was going to get beat to the edge and just did a really nice job with closing speed and was able to recover and hold ball carriers to minimal gains, especially in the second half. So that's one guy where he had a pair of TFLs on the day, and I'm encouraged by what he showed. Shout out to Devin Hyde as well for getting his first career sack late in the game. The effort that he showed on that play was really awesome. And as someone, a friend of the pod, where he talked about his background in rugby, seeing things like that is not necessarily surprising. And after he was included on the depth chart, it was cool to see him get in and make plays like that. So I'm really encouraged as to what his future might be. I really do hope that, from a standpoint of what this defense can be, that a lot of that was just early season jitters or, oh, hey, miscommunications, whatever it might have been, because we certainly saw a few of those. One of them came on a just horrendous trio of plays early in the second half when tight end Jackson Warren, first he ran up the seam on 3rd and 19 for 27 yards, just beating. It looked like Buda Alupta was the linebacker who was supposed to drop back a little bit further in coverage and didn't. Might have been a miscommunication between him and Mikel Osteen. We didn't get a chance to ask either of those guys about that after the game. So that's something I'm really curious to see what Jedd Fisch might say about it on Monday, what Ryan Walters might on Tuesday. So that's something that I'll keep everybody updated on here on Locked On Huskies. But then on the next play, there's a pass interference call against Ephesians Prysock, which also wasn't necessarily pretty. I like Ephesians Prysock in coverage. I think he fits the scheme really, really well, but that wasn't necessarily his best play. And then there was the odd play after that where Jedd Fisch talked about it after the game, where Colorado State came out in an unbalanced set, and he said it was an illegal formation where he saw only 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. I haven't been able to go back and do a full rewatch of this game just yet, but I do want to take him at his word for that. And that doesn't necessarily excuse just trying to call a penalty. You're supposed to do your job no matter what. But we saw a couple members of the defense ask the referees for a flag and for different things, and it didn't happen. And Jackson Warren just ran uncovered into the end zone for a 26-yard touchdown, I believe was the number. Those are things that need to be rectified. There are some mental lapses there that certainly can be rectified very quickly by going back and watching the film. And I want to give Washington the benefit of the doubt on that, because I look at some of these numbers here, and outside of the 3 touchdown drives where Washington gave up 206 yards, which is certainly not an acceptable number when it comes to, playing a G5 opponent, but the other 7 drives of the game, Washington gave up 59 total yards. On those 7 drives, 4 of them were 3 and outs. 2 of them were turnover on downs. And then there was the interception by Mikel Osteen as well. So I think that outside of a couple drives early in the game, which again, were concerning, and there are several things that you need to rectify from those drives, there is still a lot to like about what this defense is bringing to the table. And one guy I want to shout out because there wasn't necessarily a ton of pressure from the middle of the defensive line. One guy who I thought had a couple of really nice reps was Utah transfer Simone Peppa. I thought watching him one-on-one isolated against the center, we saw him at his truest form, which was 2022 as a redshirt freshman when he was an all Pac-12 first teamer, according to the AP. And he's someone who I've been really excited about throughout the offseason, because I think he's the kind of guy who can do just this, who can find different ways to make an impact, both as a 2-gap defender against the run, playing nose tackle, and someone who in some of these one-on-one reps can get a little bit of a push against the center. And we saw that a couple of times. I believe it was either Zach Durfee or Jacob Lane on one of the reps that I'm talking about, where they came around on a stunt and were able to get pressure on Braden Fowler Nicolosi and force an incompletion. There are certain things that this pass rush was doing where it found ways to hit home at different points in time, but it wasn't frequent enough, especially in a game like this. So I want to give them an opportunity to get that right. I think early in the season, there are, certainly adjustments that can be made. And I think that Ryan Walters is the kind of guy who understands what needs to happen with that and can do it, because especially when you go back to his track record at Illinois, he has been able to do this in the past. So I don't want to go out and say I'm overly concerned about this defense just yet, one game in, because there's still a lot of talent in that unit, especially it showed up in the secondary. Tacario Davis had a really nice day with a couple of pass breakups, and I want to get to Alex McLaughlin in a little bit here. I think that the talent on this defense will shine through, and as the season goes on and people get a little bit more comfortable in their roles, we're going to see this defense continue to improve and fill those gaps in the run lane, because we didn't see those same problems in the second half outside of 1 or 2 plays, really, where especially just runners getting outside the tackle boxes and being able to pick up big gains. And especially that's why I wanted to shout out Jacob Lane, because one of those, it looked like the ball carrier had a couple of blockers out in front, and Jacob Lane made a really nice play to track him down from behind and hold him to no gain or minimal. I don't think he got a yard on that play. So there are a couple of certainly things that you need to improve on, but I think that all in all, the talent on this defense will shine through. And one guy who I really want to shout out before we kind of move into the really questionable play call, which stay tuned, I'll get to that on the other side of the break, is I want to talk about Leroy Bryant. This is a guy who I'm very encouraged on what he can bring at both inside and outside. There were a couple plays on Saturday where it looked like he was what he was, which is a sophomore who is still learning his position in the nickel, because this is something that he's been training with for a while under John Richardson, but doing it in a game is just so different than doing it in practice. And he's somebody I'm really encouraged about. I love his physicality in the run game. I love what he can be in man coverage. And there were just a couple reps where it didn't look like he had proper leverage and got beat. I think there was an out route where it was 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, and Colorado State was able to pick up a first down. But all in all, he is someone who I think is going to be really critical to this defense. And I would say that goes double for the guy who got his first career sack on the second weirdest play I've ever seen in Rahshawn Clark. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment's right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockdownCollege and use code LockdownCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockdownCollege and use promo code LockdownCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right. First of all, shout out to Rahshawn Clark for getting his first career sack on that 4th down kick lineup. I really don't even know what to call that kind of play call. I think we should just call it ill-advised and kind of dumb. But shout out to Rahshawn Clark for making a play on that. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring to the secondary. I kind of thought there was going to be a little bit more of a rotation between Leroy Bryant and Rahshawn in this game. But, no matter. I'm excited to see what the future holds for both those guys, because I feel like long-term, Leroy Bryant is going to wind up kicking outside next season once Takaria Davis and Ephesians Prysock graduate. So getting Rahshawn Clark as much time in the nickel as possible, where he can make plays like that, where he's just such a good athlete and loves to come downhill and hit and fill gaps and run support and blitz off the edge and do all these things, is a lot of fun to watch. So I'm excited to see what the future might hold for him in this Ryan Walters defense. And I feel like we might see him get more snaps as the season goes on, because it looked like he might have been a little banged up during fall camp. So I want to keep an eye on that, but I also want to talk about the real star in the secondary, who is someone, as all you ever days out there know, I have been so high on since the moment Washington announced that they had offered him, or excuse me, he announced an offer from Washington, and that's Northern Arizona transfer Alex McLaughlin. I was so impressed with what he brought to the table yesterday. 8 tackles, 1.5 for a loss. He had a PBU in there, and this is a guy who, when you put him on Jackson Warren late in the game, he did a really good job in man coverage, shutting him down, even though Jackson Warren is 6'5", 6'6", and has 4 or 5 inches on him at the very least. Alex did a really nice job in man coverage on him. He was great tackling in the open field, which is something I know Washington fans have been desperately looking for after the last couple of seasons, where we've seen way too many people struggle in that department. And on top of that, he's just someone who is exactly what I've been preaching all offseason is going to be such a big part of this defense, a versatile piece on the back end. We saw him line up in the post safety role. We saw him line up in the slot and play man coverage against tight ends. Like I just said, we saw him line up in an inside linebacker spot and fill gaps against the run. We saw him do a little bit of everything, and I'm so excited for his future, because this is the kind of guy who we saw McEllisteen play a lot yesterday. He led the team with 9 tackles. Alex, again, was right behind him with 8. So the secondary and these safeties are going to be an integral part of making plays and just filling these holes against the run, which is why I wanted to talk about McEllisteen a little bit earlier, because you can attribute a couple of those big runs to him not coming down enough or overcommitting at certain points to the gap that he was supposed to play. And I think that as the season goes on, we might see Alex play that role a little bit more, and Mikel might just like play a little bit further back and play that post safety role a little bit more. So that's something I'm really intrigued to watch as the season continues on, because I think he's the kind of guy who, again, when you go back and you watch his tape from Northern Arizona, it shows exactly this, that he is the kind of player who's around the ball all the time and just finds a way to make plays no matter what. And stuffing the stat sheet the way he did in his Washington debut is a really nice, just kind of look into what the future could hold, because this is exactly why one of my bold predictions before the start of the season was that he was going to be Washington's leading tackler by the end of the year. He just has the talent. He's got the wherewithal. And when it comes to one-on-ones in the open field, if he can prove that he can win those all season long, those are the kinds of plays that, especially over the last couple of years, I think about some of these Husky defenses where you were giving up 3rd and longs and doing all these other things. And there are certainly some areas that need to be rectified with that as well. And, I feel like a lot of that can be more attributed to the pass rush than the secondary, are things that I believe that Alex can help rectify. I think Buda Alukta needs to play a part in that. McAllister, CJ Christian are all guys who need to do that. And while we're on the secondary, by the way, since I kind of wanted to save these last couple of minutes here for just some shout outs to guys that I was really, really impressed by. One more person in the secondary who absolutely deserves a mention is a guy who didn't make the depth chart, but did see the field both at safety and on special teams. And that's Ryland Dillard-Allen. We saw on a couple different occasions exactly why the Husky coaching staff is so high on this former 4-star recruit, where on special teams, he came down and laid a really violent hit on a kick returner. And during that 2-minute drill on defense, where he was lined up as that third safety, we also saw him put a couple of really nice hits on a couple of various pass catchers. So he's someone that, as the season goes on, if he overtakes Vincent Holmes, because we didn't see a whole lot of CJ Christian last night either, I'm curious to see what the future holds for him, because I've talked about it a lot, where the future of the secondary in terms of the 2 starting safeties is going to be RDA and Alex McLaughlin for the 2026 season at least. So finding ways to get those guys on the field as much as possible is going to be a really important part to finding success this season and beyond, because I really do think that Washington's ceiling can still be somewhere in that 8-4, 9-3 range, despite the struggles we saw last night, because I look at the way the schedule shapes up and I look at the very fixable mistakes. I feel that everything we saw Washington just perform below average or worse at in this opener are all things that can be very easily fixed by tape, by coaching, and by things that are just well within control of these players. It's not a physicality lack. It's not a talent gap. There are a lot of things that just with a little bit of extra time at adjustments, now that you're able to see how some opposing offenses might want to attack you, are going to be fixed over the next couple of weeks, especially as we get into Big Ten play. So those are a couple of things that I'm really interested in. A couple of guys I would certainly recommend keeping an eye on the defensive side of the ball. Let's jump over to offense, where one guy who we've been very high on throughout fall camp because he's just shown up and made plays on a day in, day out basis. I gave him a shout out a little bit earlier as well, is Desmond Roebuck, where it was really interesting to just watch the receiver rotation play out from up in the press box, because a lot of times, shout out to our good buddies, Alex Katz and Nick Lemkow, who are helping me and Lars out as we all try to, just play off each other and talk about what we're seeing, what's going on. When we were watching some of the receiver substitutions, seeing Desmond Roebuck come in as the first guy off the bench was really cool to see. And it's really exciting because obviously it's a testament to just how good he was during fall camp, that Jedd Fisch was willing and able to put him into the rotation that early. And part of that probably also has to do with the minor injury to Omari Evans, who didn't play in this game, was listed as questionable on the availability report coming into the game. And Jedd Fisch said it's not supposed to be a long-term injury. So there's something to monitor there, but I think it also just shows that, with Audric Harris and Kevin Green Jr., a couple other guys, that this coaching staff has talked a lot about being really, really excited about getting Desmond on the field in the same light or even ahead of a couple of those guys is certainly notable and something to keep an eye out for as the season progresses, because I want to see if they wind up burning his red shirt just due to the fact that he does exactly what he did yesterday, where he came onto the field. He was a solid run blocker at different points in time. I think he's still going to continue improving in that department, but he just got open. And when he did, Damon Williams was able to find him. And seeing the first catch of his college career go for 20-something yards on a crossing route was really cool, because that was one of the plays we saw him succeed at a lot during fall camp. Was he's just so good at just turning on a dime and breaking off his routes crisp, clean, and quickly. And that was the case with that first play. So when I just look at what the future might hold for him, if we see more of him in the slot, I'm not necessarily going to be surprised. And I think it's something to keep an eye on because Raiden Weisbright only got one touch on the little jet sweep play at the end of the game. But I think that's something that's going to change in the coming weeks. So keep an eye on both of those freshman receivers. I think they're both really, really talented and offer a lot. The question is just going to be how often is Jedd Fisch going to want to get them involved in the offense? Because it's something I've talked about throughout the offseason as well, is most of the time throughout his now 5 years as a head coach, he has mainly funneled targets through two wide receivers. And we kind of saw that again yesterday, where 12 targets went to to Denzel Boston, Rasheed Williams, and the other 15 pass attempts that Damon Williams had, I believe was the number, were spread out among four guys. So I think that we're going to see Denzel Boston, Rasheed Williams emerge from the pack as the two top targets and pass catchers and, all major categories. But I think that there is certainly room for Raiden and Roebuck and some of these other guys to make a way for themselves and just carve out a bigger role in this rotation. And you could say the same about Decker DeGraff as well. So there's a lot to keep an eye on there. But one more guy I want to talk about before I get out of here for the day is I want to talk about Adam Mohammed. This is a guy who I've been really excited about for a while. And yes, I'm going to toot my own horn here a little bit and say that one of my bold predictions was that he was finally going to score his first career touchdown in this game, and that he did, which was nice to see, where 7 carries, 25 yards is a solid day. He also added 38 through the receiving game. 33 of those came on a nice screenplay where Damon Williams did a perfect job holding that ball to the very last second and getting it out to him on 3rd and long. And he showed exactly why this coaching staff is so excited about him. The speed, the burst, the wiggle, the physicality. It's 6'1" and 219 pounds. He is a really, really exciting running back. And I think there are a couple of plays where maybe if he bounces it to the outside, he can pick up a couple more yards here. But it seemed like he was very clearly just asked to follow his blockers on a couple of these plays. And he did that. And it was one or two of them looked like just 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But as he continues to get more confident in himself and get more decisive as a runner, he looks like he's going to be a major weapon for this team. And we saw that show up on a couple of different kick returns as well. So as the season goes on, I don't know how much more we're going to see of Jonah Coleman back with that unit. I feel like you don't want him back there taking unnecessary hits. So if we see Jordan Washington kind of take some of those snaps away from Jonah, that's just certainly going to be something to monitor, in my opinion. But Adam is a guy who he deserves more touches because of just everything he brings to the table from a physicality and athleticism standpoint. And he's shown that he's got the vision to back it all up as well. So as we continue to move forward in the season, he is someone that I think is going to be a major factor as just one of these just guys in a really deep rotation of talented skill players along this Washington offense, which is why I've been so excited about this team. And we got a little glimpse into why Washington really can achieve more in 2025. But like I said, they still got a long way to go. And with that being said, I'm going to jump out of here today. Thank you so much to all you ever did out there for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, please make sure you subscribe, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new show. Plus, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.